Welcome to our participants. Thank you for being here tonight. I want to thank Candace and Crystal with OnDiem, who will be providing the content today. This webinar is presented by CareStack and Darby. I'm here representing CareStack. For those of you who are not familiar with CareStack, we are a technology company. We are a cloud-based practice management software. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to the wonderful OnDiem team. Crystal's going to take lead on this.
Great. So employee misclassifications, demystifying the 1099 versus a W-2 debate in dentistry. So these are the disclosures. I do work for OnDiem. The CE program is delivered without commercial support and is co-sponsored between CareStack, Darby, and OnDiem. So here's some information about me. You guys can read it. I have been a dental hygienist for about 25 years, and I'm the executive director and founder of Smiles Across Montana. And I am also recently the relationship development manager for dental hygiene at OnDiem. So I've been a clinician, I've been an educator, an advocate, and a speaker, and I founded a nonprofit. So I'm also a business owner, and I personally have worked as a 1099 and have ran my program with a lot of our now employees as contractors. So I have a lot of experience with this. I've had the good and the bad, and I'll be talking to you about that today. So why are we here? So for practice owners, if you're a practice owner, we are here to protect your practice from permanent closures. That's something that can happen, from criminal penalties, from costly and debilitating legal proceedings that come with misclassifications. And for employees, we just know there's a lot of questions out there, and so we're here to educate you, the professional, on classifications. And we're going to show you how to protect yourself. So the gig economy, so it's booming right now, and more hygienists and dental assistants are temping than ever before, which means we're seeing more independent contractors than ever. So 73.1 million are estimated gig workers in the US for all kinds of different jobs. So when you're working as a gig employee, you can think about yourself as a dental hygienist. Is that really the right classification that you would be an independent contractor? And we have some examples of just what's happened from other people working in this kind of realm. So there was a story, let's just call her Sally. Sally graduated from hygiene school in May, and she wants to work on her own terms. She wants to set her own schedule. This seems awesome, right? We all want to do that because that's what we love about temping, correct? You can take vacation when you need to. You can, if your kid has a big play or something going on at your school or a game, you can set your own hours. That's amazing. But Sally starts working gigs through multiple staffing agencies. One is a 1099 and the other is a W-2. She takes on both of these jobs, not understanding the difference. And while she's working at the office where she is contracted as a 1099, she accidentally trips over a cord, which is connected to a piece of equipment. She knocks the piece of equipment off the wall and she falls onto the patient. And, if that's not bad enough, she is now responsible for the office for the equipment that she broke because she's not an employee there. And who's responsible for her injuries if she's not an employee there? She's responsible for injuries. What about if the patient is hurt? Who's responsible for any injuries that might happen to the patient? Well, it would be Sally. If she was a W-2, she would be covered by malpractice. She'd be covered by her liability and workman's comp. Instead, she's left holding the bill for it all. The office has now said, we won't pay you until you pay us for the equipment. So this young hygienist unknowingly got herself in a really bad predicament. So the IRS and Department of Labor are cracking down on misclassifications, and that's been going on for a while now. So there's a big medical staffing company called Stint, and they had misclassified over 400 workers. And during this misclassification, when they were researching it, they actually were forced to close down for a while as they looked into this. And this is happening more and more. As we have more gig workers, we're going to have more of a crackdown. So the problem, what we're trying to solve is, the problem today is the misclassification. What is a misclassification? So it doesn't matter if it was on purpose or a mistake. I think that's really important for us all to know. I'd love for you to tell the IRS that, well, I didn't know. I think if any of you have ever dealt with the IRS, I don't think that's probably gonna go over too well for you. So when you're misclassified, an employee misclassification occurs when an employer incorrectly misclassifies a worker, whether this is done on purpose or mistake. So for you practice owners, when a worker is misclassified as an independent contractor, you can face serious risks and consequences, and the same for employees. We talked about some of the things that could happen to you, the things that you could be liable for, but also just the things you're missing out that you deserve as an employee. I just keep thinking about the whole idea that you can say, well, I didn't know any better, but the IRS doesn't care. And practices just have to be aware that you're facing severe ongoing financial penalties and scrutiny from the IRS and the Department of Labor. And I see some questions. I think we're just going to hold off on the questions till the end, just so you know. So here's an example of the IRS and the Department of Labor cracking down. So you have what's called a stop work order. So the entire operation is shut down until this investigation is done. So if you can imagine, it is a government agency doing an investigation. This could take months to, possibly a year. Here's a few examples on here of just different companies that misclassified workers for different reasons. So the dental billing company on the right side of the screen, they misqualified because they didn't want to pay overtime. If your people are working overtime, you have to pay overtime, but they've been getting away with not paying overtime. So this is why they're cracking down and trying to stop some of that. Employee relationship, what classifications exist? So in dentistry, there are two of the most common that you will see is the W-2 employee and the 1099, or what's also known as the independent contractor. So today we're going to just be talking about some of the differences between a W-2 employee and a 1099 independent contractor. So for a W-2 employee, taxes are withheld through their company's payroll, and a W-2 tax form is provided at the end of the year. So, and they're going to receive protections under the law, such as minimum wage and overtime, and they must have access to benefits such as health insurance and workers' compensation. And a 1099, so it's kind of the opposite, it's referred to as self-employed or an independent contractor. So they're going to be responsible for their own taxes, and the entire tax burden is going to lay on them. Whether you plan on using your Social Security or Medicare in the future, you still have to pay in. So I think that's something a lot of times that people don't know when they're signing up to be an independent contractor, that how large the taxes are that they're going to have to pay, and that the employer usually pays a portion of that. So it's not just about them taking out the taxes for you. Oh, I'll take out my own. You're actually missing out on part of the taxes that they'd be paying for you. So other employee relationships. So we have the full-time employee. So full-time is 40 hours. Part-time is 30 hours and under. And a contract employee or independent contractor 1099 is temporary. Or you think of someone filling in. So no, that's not temporary. They're more of like somebody who has a contract with someone to work in your office. I like to think of like a construction contractor. Is it something that you don't already offer in your office? You're going to contract to work doing something that that office isn't already doing. And then a temporary, think of someone who's filling in for maternity leave or a short-term relationship, say people who are working in different stores right before Christmas. Those are temp employees. Or when we do temp at an office, we're temporarily there, but we still have the right to workman's compensation and these kind of things. So why does misclassification happen at all? So we'll just go through a few examples. So last minute urgent needs. You know, a practice desperately needs to fill a shift in order to prevent a slew of appointment cancellations. We've all been there. I think we've seen a lot of this. We're short-staffed. We need somebody, heaven forbid someone gets sick and we need to have someone coming in. And in order to keep things easy, you know, they offer an open shift to a hygienist as a 1099 contractor. While this may meet their immediate needs, it exposes both the hygienist and the practice to great risk. Another example is an office that doesn't have an HR, no payroll or in-house, no legal guidance. And the owner of a small practice does not have maybe anyone to help them with this. They regularly bring on hygienists and assistants as independent contractors, and they are completely unaware that they're breaking laws. They might be working with a staffing company. They're like, well, the staffing company was getting us the hygienist, we didn't know, but they're still going to be responsible. And use of a non-compliant dental staffing platform, we just talked about that, but the staffing platform treats all their dental professionals. If they treat all of their dental professionals as 1099, and even assures, sometimes they even assure that it's legal to actually classify someone this way. That yes, it's, you know, you can you're legal to be classified to this or as a 1099. You are an independent contractor. So this is just really misleading information from both the practice and the dental professional. And again, just leaving us all open to serious risk and, you know, loss of money, both for the practice and the professional that is working as a 1099. So information in the landscape that can be conflicting and confusing. We're going to be talking about your best source of truth. So where do you get your information? There's a lot of just really confusing information out there right now. You know, people that are hearing, oh, of course you can, you know, work as an independent contractor, you know, but what is your best source of truth? So this is a predicament I was in, and it is not that easy to figure this out. I feel now the information that I have, the help that I've been able to get, but at the time when I was working as a 1099, I will tell you, when I was working that way, I didn't even think about it not being okay, because that was what was offered to me. Like, surely they wouldn't be offering me a position and a way to be paid, and it was the only way to be paid. Surely they wouldn't be offering that to me if it wasn't legal. So I do have to say, I completely understand where people are coming from. I too have been through that. I too have been classified as a 1099. And another thing that's happened with me is I too have misclassified. That was something we just didn't know. So in Montana, we can work under, we can have direct supervision to our patients as dental hygienists. And that was something that we thought we could do, but there are so many different parts of it that we just didn't meet the criteria. And what right now, it's been, I don't know, 9 months. For the last 9 months, 10 months, we've completely changed our program over to, as anyone who works for our organization is now a W-2. I want to share that because I've been there. I've looked for the answers myself, and I didn't know who to trust. And when you actually just look at the information that's out there from the government, it's pretty clear as to what you can do. So when you're looking for information and you're asking different groups, so maybe you go on Facebook and you're like, hey, can I work as a 1099? Is this legal? I really don't think that's your best source of truth. I think that, I don't think that will stand up for you with the government when you're, paying your taxes or your business is being scrutinized. They're not going to want to hear like, oh, I'm glad you heard about it on a Facebook group, but that's just not good enough. So what is your best source of truth? Is the temp agency that you're working through, are they going to be liable to have to pay your taxes? No, not at all. What about your unemployment? Same, no. What about the bill Sally was issued for the equipment that was broke? Is the group that told her that it's okay to work like that, are they going to be paying for the equipment? Are they going to be helping Sally out at all? The answer is no. So Sally has unknowingly put herself in a really risky spot. So a lot of what we're going to be guiding you towards today is just not believing everything you hear. You need to understand the tax laws for yourself, because at the end of the day, you are responsible. And, if you don't, if this is still cloudy when we're done, I urge you to go to your accountant or your, whoever you work with to do your taxes and ask them, can you help me with this? Because you really don't want to continue to be misclassified. So 10 to 30% of employers in the United States have misclassified employees as 1099 independent contractors. So based on this statistic, 1 in 3 employers has misclassified a worker, and the workers have paid the bill at a really huge cost. So if you look at this, the average income loss per year by a misclassified worker is $17,000. That seems like a lot of money to leave on the table because you just didn't know better. So misclassified professionals face serious financial consequence and risk. So these are some of the things that we've seen out there, like from, a lot of young hygienists, but even seasoned hygienists and assistants that are out there. They're telling stories about, whoa, I didn't know this was going to happen. And that might seem silly to some of us who've been working for a while. Like, of course you have to pay your taxes, but we have lots of examples of people just working, and maybe you're just out of school and you've taken a couple jobs and you didn't realize how much you were going to have to pay and you didn't set it aside. So, I think we think, wow, if I work as an independent contractor, I can write all these different things off. I'm going to make more money. I need more money now. And when tax time comes around, so April 15th, and your tax bill is due and you haven't saved the money and you find out how much you need, because I think a lot of times, some people get money back. And I've seen a lot of hygienists come up with a pretty big tax bill if they weren't paying in all the time. So I was always set up as an S corporation and I paid in constantly through the year. But there were people set up as an LLC. You're not required to do that, but you are required at the end of the year to pay all the money that you owe to the federal government, and you're required to do it by a certain time. So the misclassified professional misses out on invaluable benefits and essential protection. So Here's what they're giving up. You shoulder the entire 15% of the tax burden, yours and the practice's, meaning you ultimately take home less pay. You may be unprotected from unexpected and expensive healthcare costs. If a patient sues you, the dentist and the practice, you could be treated as an independent contractor with full liability. You can't collect unemployment if you're out of work, unless you are paying into unemployment. So I don't know how many people working as independent contractors are paying into unemployment. Those are things you have to ask yourself. Have I paid in? You're left without coverage or payment for on-the-job injuries and illnesses. And it's just really unfair when you really look at it. So I think that a lot of us maybe had never collected unemployment until the pandemic hit. And when it did, I'm sure you were happy to have it. I know that independent contractors who didn't pay into unemployment didn't have that luxury. And I know quite a few hygienists that really suffered during that time. So what's going to happen? What risks are happening to the offices? Like what's happening if you misclassify? Look at these penalties and fines. Like you can get prison time if they can prove that you knowingly misclassify. You can get prison time. I think that's way big of a risk to save some money. And ultimately, you're not doing the right thing. You're not doing what's best for your employees, for the people who work for you. You may be required to pay all unpaid federal taxes, federal insurance contributions, their FICA taxes, their unemployment, their FUTA taxes, fines, and interest. This could include so many different things. You'll be required to compensate your misclassified worker for any lost wages and benefits that resulted from their misclassification. And again, you could have a temporary shutdown of business locations or even a permanent closure. I feel like that's just, I know I've said it already, but that's just a lot to risk to classify your, people who are working for you as independent contractors. So Brian Kaleo, what do the experts say? So Brian Kaleo, who is the director of DSO Industry Group at Dykema, he is saying under applicable IRS and Department of Labor regulations, it is improper to classify most hygienists who work at dental practices as 1099 contractors, even when they are working part-time or as a temp. So the regulations, they are very clear and the consequences can be huge. So that's what the experts are saying. I think you could probably get a lot of quotes from other people. If you were to ask the experts, these are the people who, they know the law, they know the tax laws. We're going to show you how to figure it out on your own, because we've said, you can't just go off hearsay. You need to know how this works. So why are dental professionals W-2 employees? You may want to be classified as a 1099 so you can write off your expenses. So I just have to laugh at this one because I've been a part of this. I've seen this for a long time. I've heard people say like, oh, I want to be an independent contractor because I can, write off my phone. I can write off my, haircut. I can write off my car, people think they can write off a lot of things. And okay, I'll agree with you. You can write off a lot of things until you get caught. And then I wouldn't want to be there cleaning up that mess. You definitely, when you're writing off things that you're not able to, the tax laws are pretty clear as to what you can write off. And I know this because I've been so discouraged. I think any of us who, go to meetings a lot and things like that, you're like, I should be able to write off this gown that I'm never gonna wear at my home in Montana. I should be able to write this off because I'm never going to wear it again. Well, actually, no, you can't write it off. The only thing you can actually write off is the scrubs that you're wearing that you use to do the job. I just had to bring that up because that one always makes me laugh, because I'm also irritated by that. Like, this is just no fair. So we're going to look at a few different ways of figuring out if you're classified. Like, how do you figure out if you can be if you're a W-2 employee, or if you are sorry, you guys, my phone is like driving me crazy. People are texting and calling. There's 3 different tests, but these are what you should consider anytime you're thinking about working as a 1099. You want to go back and reference these. So the first one is the IRS 3-factor test. And I think you can find this right on the IRS site. And it's essentially, does the company have control what and how the worker does his job? So are you making your own schedule? Can you work till midnight or in the middle of the night? Do you schedule your own patients? And most state dental practice acts dictate that hygienists and assistants work under the direct or general supervision of a dentist. So even in our case, because we didn't have to work under the direct supervision, but we had direct access. So, okay, there's one thing. But let's go to the next one. Financial. Are the business aspects of the worker's job controlled by the payer? So are you billing their insurance, and do the checks come to you? Did you purchase the materials that you're using? Is the office equipment yours? Or, is everything that you're using yours and you brought it in there and you're working as an independent contractor with your own patients? So then the third thing with this one is the relationship, the type of relationship. Are there written contracts or benefits? Will the relationship continue? And is the work performed a key aspect of the business? So a key aspect of the business is, are you doing the same work as the dental office? So if you're not coming in and painting the dental office or something like that, then you're not an independent contractor. So if you're coming into a dental office and you're doing dental hygiene, then you're not part of the office, or not. Then you're not considered a 1099. I think that's where people just get a little foggy sometimes. They're like, well, I've done these 2. I've got 2 right, but look at the third. So that's the first type of test that we have. And the next is the ABC state level test. And an employer must prove all of the following. So this one's different. The employer must prove all of the following exists for someone to be an independent contractor. So many states like California, Massachusetts, and New Jersey use this type of testing to clarify if they're going to be, a 1099 or an employee. So some of the biggest differences is that, again, you have to prove all of these things are happening. So is the worker free from the control and direction of the hiring entity? Do you answer to no one? Are you working, again, under the supervision of someone else? If there's a dentist in the office and you're working as a hygienist or an assistant in that office, this one's not for you. I mean, it's really pretty clear, So that, okay, we've got 1 strike, but we're saying we have to have all 3. So B, the worker performs work that is outside of the usual course of the hiring entity's business. So are you doing something? Are you coming in and fixing the electricity? Are you a specialist of some type? Maybe this could work if you're a myofunctional therapist coming in. That might be different. But if you're temping in an office as a dental hygienist or an assistant, then here you go again. That's strike 2, it doesn't work. And the last one is the worker is independently established. gosh, sorry. So if you're working in the same nature that they're performing in that office, if you're doing dentistry, you know, then this doesn't work either. And this test is not as flexible as common law test by the IRS. So the burden of proof with the ABC test it's on the employer now. They have to prove that the worker is a true independent contractor. And we really don't see very many times when you can actually prove this. And there are a lot of states that they actually require this. So it's good to know. Again, if you work under the supervision of a dentist, you are not a 1099. You know, there are some exceptions, and we said that, but be careful. Remember, you can't have any of the things, you know, so yes, you might be a myofunctional therapist coming in, but if you are using all of their equipment and if you're not booking the appointments yourself, then no, you're not an independent contractor. So we look at a lot of different state dental practice acts. You know, there aren't a lot of states that allow direct access. So that's something. So most of the time you just wouldn't have that luxury at all. So, I mean, just saying, like, look at your state practice act. If you're working under supervision, I mean, I just feel like that's really, really clear. An exception, though, is dentists don't work under the direction or supervision. So there are cases that a dentist can, in fact, be a 1099. An example is a locum. So they can come in and fill in for a period of time. But if they end up working for like years, then they're actually an employee and they would not be considered a 1099 anymore either. I know you guys are going to have questions. I see some coming through. That's the part that always makes me nervous. Like, they've got questions. So the regulations are clear according to legal experts, and the industry is catching on. People are actually being caught for these kind of things. Like, it's being brought to our attention. More and more information is coming out to show that the government is cracking down on the dental community. And I thought it was really funny. Don't get caught with your scrubs down. Maybe it's not that funny. Candace and I laughed a lot when we were creating these slides. I don't know, just laugh with us. It's okay, guys. So we've kind of talked a lot and maybe scared you a little, but the solution, how you can avoid misclassification, that's what we're going to talk about next. So for employers, you can confirm with your hiring, for employees, you can confirm with your hiring practice that you will be considered as a W-2 employee. Do not accept a 1099. Find jobs through a dental staffing service that is W-2 compliant. Don't choose a service that forces you to break the law. So in terms of legislation, states are beginning to pass laws creating presumptive employee status. These laws presume that the workers are employees of an employer, not independent contractors. So therefore, it is a responsibility of the employers to overcome this. So there are quite a few states. So as of 2016, 35 states have laws against misclassification of employees, up from 30 states in 2013. And I really don't know what it is now, but I'm sure it's edging in closer to 50 with those numbers. And now for practice owners, to avoid the risks of misclassification, dental practices should mitigate penalties by converting misclassified workers into W-2 employees. You know, I always think, like, if you really didn't know, okay. But once you know, it's your responsibility. I think just what I said earlier, that good luck telling the IRS, like, oh, I didn't know. And if they can prove you knew, we talked about jail time. I think that's just way too big of a risk to save a few dollars. And if you're not doing what's best for your employees in the first bit, if you're not giving them the benefits that they deserve, how are these employees going to serve you? What you can do if you're not sure how to classify a worker, the practice owners can actually do an SS8 form with the IRS. SS8 forms are for both the practice and the employee. So that's a great thing. You can go onto the IRS website and find that. Or if you have questions, you can reach out to us. We know where to find those too. And you should be filling your staffing needs through a W-2 compliant service. The fix. So we're going to talk about what do you do if you've been misclassified or if you've misclassified an employee. The good news is you can get help. If you think you're being misclassified, this information will give you steps that you can take to make your wrong right. So here we go. For employees, if you've been misclassified, take the following steps. First, I would start with talking to the dental office and request a W-2. Send your request through certified mail if you have to. You need to say, I asked them for this. If that doesn't prompt action, file an SS8 with IRS. So that's something you can do. You can fill out this SS8 form. If it's found that you were misclassified, the employer will be required to pay all your back taxes, fines, and penalties. So you can find this on the irs.gov website. Let the IRS know that you've been misclassified and they will open a case and make a ruling. If it's found that you were misclassified, the employer will pay. For practice owners, if you believe you've misclassified an employee, and this is something that happens, especially if someone comes into your practice and they're like, oh, I only work as an independent contractor, and say you need the person, you've had, your hygienist is sick or on maternity leave, there's things that you can do now. So you can reclassify your employee now. You can consider tax insurance to protect against financial losses, but this tax insurance is super expensive. The premium can be 2.5 to 5.5% of the total tax coverage requested. So for example, Uber was sued for $100 million. They would have had to pay $2.5 to $5.5 million just in the premium to get the insurance if they got caught. But why must waste money and the stress of worrying about getting caught? You should just be doing the right thing. So you can also conduct an internal audit, file an SS8, or use a W-2 compliant service to identify and mitigate misclassification issues in the future. So you're going to want to pay an account for all back taxes, contributions, and fines associated with this misclassification. Do not simply end the working relationship with the employee. This could even lead to more severe penalties. So if you've misclassified someone, you need to go back and you need to do the right thing. So when in doubt, I think look at the ABC and the original IRS classification. I feel like that will just help you a lot. I think maybe even, hang it up in your office for people when they come in and they, say, I only work as an independent contractor. And now I think we're ending with this, up to 5% of workers who claimed they were misclassified as independent contractors were reclassified as employees following review. So that's the good news. If you've been misclassified, there is something that you can do about it. And then I'm going to give you guys the verification code and we're going to go into questions. You guys had more time to look and see what people were asking. Have we looked through any of them? I think some of them had been answered.
Let's see.
So Candace, you're going to be better with the questions here than me.
You're fine. I know, okay, so I know Krista Martin asked if temp hygienists that are W-2, if they have to get liability insurance. Not necessarily. I would check with your employer. As a W-2 employer, right now we cover all of our employees on our liability insurance. So that should be something that the employer does if you're a W-2. Let's see. I won't make any comments about other staffing agencies, whether they're legal or illegal. You'll have to do your due diligence on that. What is the difference between W-9 and 1099? So a W-9 is what an employer will give you to fill out to get your tax information if they are classifying you as a 1099. So W-9, that is your tax form that you're filling out with your information in order to be paid as a 1099. W-4 and W-2, people have been talking about that. W-4 is your tax form that you'll fill out to let your employer know how much taxes to deduct. Your W-2 is the tax form you get back at the end of the year with your earnings for taxes. So W-4 and W-2 are usually hand in hand for the employee W-2 relationship. So someone asked a question regarding on diem, how would it work when a staff member calls off sick? I know you're able to choose shifts ahead of time, but how are the timely shift issues handled? Typically for us at On Diem, we do have a pretty bit large amount of dental hygiene users and dental assistant users on our platform. So we can, if you needed someone in a time crunch, we do make that happen. We do that every day for a lot of our clients. So we can do that. If you know someone's going to be out ahead of time, we can provide you someone as well.
What is the difference between W-9 and 1099 and W-4 and W-2? So I'll let you answer.
That's kind of what I was talking about. So the W-9, when someone comes to an employer that's going to work as a 1099, you would be filling out a W-9 form, which is a tax document that basically lets the employer know how to pay you as a 1099. So W-9 is the tax form they take up front to pay you for the 1099. The W-4 is the document that you fill out for a W-2 relationship, letting the employer know how many deductions to take. And I did see during the presentation, I saw someone, I believe it was Sarah, that mentioned that they filed an SS8 before and did get reimbursed for their earnings, which is good to hear. That is your recourse if you have been misclassified. And I will say when the IRS reclassifies you, most of the time the employer has to pay back not only your taxes, but they also will have to pay you for benefits that you missed out on as a 1099 versus an employee. And I see Sarah's adding some more in here that it took 2 years, I think, for everything to go through, which is crazy. That's the government for you. But it does work.
So there was one from Jessica. I work with a staffing agency and they don't offer W-2s, only 1099. And other times I work under my own LLC with contracts with dental offices. So you're telling me that I'm doing something wrong. So, I would say, well, we're not necessarily telling you that you're doing something wrong, but as you look at those, the tests, like the ABC test. And so this was the same exact position that I was put in. We know that people aren't meaning to do anything wrong, but when you look at these classifications, I just think it's a risk that you're taking that isn't worth taking right now. I think that, if you were able to, like I said, our program, we did work direct access, that was even different. But, I hate to ever say someone's doing something wrong. I think the biggest thing I would say out of this is look at the worksheets or the tests that we gave you. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, take it to your accountant, have them look at it. Like that will make you feel better. I had a couple of conversations that were kind of aggressive over this. And it wasn't until, I met someone who was like, no, it's not that hard to, reclassify and, start over. I think it's something you can look at, changing the way you contract with people.
Yeah. Yeah, and one thing that I'll stress that Crystal mentioned kind of throughout her presentation is this Sally lady. That is based on a true story. It is based on a true story of someone that came in to me asking for some HR advice because they were misclassified. So, that's the reason for this. We really want to educate the dental professionals out there so that you don't get caught like that. It can get as severe as that practice going after that worker for equipment and, suing them for everything they're worth.
Oh, man, I have to jump in here. It says, my accountant stated that it is legal. Do you have legal references stating it is not? There's the IRS site. If you were to go to that site, you would find that.
Let me see if I can find the IRS, the 3-point test, and I can put it in the chat.
That's really just scary. I would look at your accountant, and I'm really sorry about that. I think at the end of the day, your accountant's not going to be responsible. You are, unless you have it in writing from them that they said it was legal. They're not a lawyer. I'm just saying, like, I'm not trying to, be aggressive that way. But for me, I couldn't sleep at night. I think those things are all really hard on you. It's hard enough working in dental and then worrying about tax laws.
What if you open your own staffing agency and staff yourself?
So someone here says, it sounds to me the burden is on the dentist and the risk is not so much with the hygienist unless something happens. Like, what kind of insurance do you have for yourself? And I guess, of course, they should know they have to pay taxes. You're making it more sound like it's the hygienist's fault, and no, we're not making it sound like the hygienist's fault. The hygienist is leaving things open, and sometimes I've worked as a 1099, and at the end of the day, I'm not classified as a 1099 when working under general supervision or any supervision of a dental office. So there's a lot of people saying, I feel like the ABC is vague and subjective. So that may be true, but you're still going to be liable.
And I think the biggest thing here too is to understand that the IRS is going to be your federal test, right? Because states always have their own laws and regulations. So the ABC test that Crystal shared is the test that is used for several states when they go in to look at misclassification. So those are your two best sources of truth out there. Is going to be the test through the IRS, because that's what they're going to do if they investigate you, and the ABC test for some of those states, because that's what they're going to go off of as well. The other thing, I saw someone mention about the 50 states. We mentioned the State Dental Practice Acts as well. It's really important that you understand all the regulations and laws around your State Dental Practice Act, whether that does have some kind of verbiage around control or supervision of the dentist. That is something too that would be looked at on the state level.
What if you open your own staffing agency and staff yourself? I think that's great as long as you're paying yourself as an employee. So if your staffing agency is paying you as an employee, then I think that's great. I think you'd be A-okay. So, and there are places that some of it might be legal. So in states like California, Colorado, even Montana, for some of the work that we do, so in Montana, we have what's called a limited access permit provider. But if they're not your patients, if it's not your equipment, then it's not a small business.
And I will say a lot of people in the chats and even the questions are asking about a specific staffing provider that they're using. Anyone that feels like they have been misclassified, I would suggest filing your SS8 with the IRS and let them make the call.
I guess at the end of the day, just being a hygienist myself, working as both employee and an independent contractor over the years, I just urge you, this is confusing, but I know that I was having trouble sleeping at night. I'm thinking, And also I really, really would look at, especially with the gig economy, I would look at what you're writing off. I think that that's some serious stuff. You have to be really, really careful. You don't want to have an audit. You know, I know that a lot of our hygienists in our state were audited last year. It's definitely not something fun to have happen to you, and that is something that can happen. And you know, there's a lot of things in here, people saying, well, it's really vague, and yes, it is really vague, you know, which also does protect you in a way. But, you know, again, if you are knowingly misclassified, that's an issue.
Someone had asked to kind of, if they are misclassified, what other things are they giving up, or more on the taxes. So Crystal mentioned like the taxes. As a W-2 employee, the employer is paying a portion of FICA taxes, which is your Medicare and Social Security taxes. So as a 1099, that is not happening. So that's what she's referring to. But the biggest, you're carrying the tax burden as a 1099, as opposed to W-2 being split for FICA.
I will say something. There's some questions coming in. People are like, oh, I was a 1099 once, and, you know, can I go back and get that reclassified? You know, I would urge you to be careful. You know, dental is a small world. We're talking about where you were really mistreated over a long period of time from someone who didn't know. I mean, I would be very, very careful to do this just because of hygienists. Like, I don't think I would go after someone for not a lot of money. I think that would be, I personally wouldn't do it. You know, I mean, maybe if you worked for 10 years for somebody, or a year for someone, and or maybe someone's whole maternity leave, or something where you weren't given any other compensation, maybe. But I think if it was me, I would be very careful about just deciding to do that for a small amount of money. I feel like that's kind of putting yourself, that's just personally how I feel, that could not turn out so great for you.
So I want to answer this last question that came in, because this is a big one. The 1099, Cindy Hutchins, I think, asked, 1099 is not covered by doctor's liability and workers' comp. Professional liability insurance and workers' comp policies dictate employees, not contractors. 1099s are considered independent contractors, so they would have to have their own insurance to have that coverage. That was the big issue for Sally, right? Because she wasn't protected in that practice. She went through a staffing agency that had W-2 and 1099 on the same platform. But when she worked as that 1099 and damaged the equipment, they came after her for the cost of that equipment. And not only that, this particular company also refused to pay her until she paid for the equipment, which again is illegal. So there again, there's a lot of that going on. So it's important to be educated and to know where your source of truth lies.
And this is just meant to be informative. I wish it was something I could have gotten some help with. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that it does help you. And again, you know, you can do what you want to do, but here, you know, I hope that you walk away with just a little bit more information on how to protect yourself, because I think we've all been asked to work it as a 1099 at one point, if you're a hygienist especially. So
I always like to be respectful of time these days, so that put us right at an hour. Thank you. Wonderful presentation, Crystal. Thank you, Candace. Thank you to Darby. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I will say, so I just read a question and it's just getting me. It was just saying, I had an office manager say that their accountant stated that a temp hygienist should be paid with a 1099. The minute that happens, you know, you can pull up these tax laws and you can get an SS8, you know. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope to see you again. Have a good evening.